Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. Donald Trump says that President Xi's trip to Vietnam is aiming to screw the US. Chinese President Xi Jinping is now heading to Malaysia for the second leg of his East Asia tour, aiming to build relations amid trade uncertainties. Ahead of Xi's impending visit to Cambodia, the country has deported an unknown number of Taiwan nationals to China on fraud charges. This move comes amid growing tensions between China and Taiwan, with the CCP launching military drills around the self-governed island. Japanese officials are set to meet in Washington on Wednesday to discuss the ongoing tariff tensions. Meanwhile, oil prices have risen over a potential tariff exemption on cars amid ongoing global trade disputes. Donald Trump has suggested that Ukraine started the war with Russia while questioning the leader's competence. Meanwhile, Ukraine has launched a deadly drone attack on Russia's Kursk region, while another Russian attack has targeted the Sumy region. Hamas has rejected the latest ceasefire proposal as talks in Cairo collapse without an agreement. The armed terrorist group demanded a full end to the war, while Israel had called on Hamas to disarm. President Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff says that any Iranian nuclear deal will hinge on verification of Tehran's weaponization capabilities. Witkoff stopped short of calling for complete dismantling of Iran's nuclear program ahead of a second round of talks. President Trump says the US could deport homegrown criminals to El Salvador. The president says his administration would ensure the move is legal, as President Bukele says mistaken deportee Agrego Garcia won't be returned to the US despite a Supreme Court order. The Department of Education has frozen funding worth $2.3 billion for Harvard. It comes as the university rejected numerous demands from the Trump administration, which is cracking down on what it says is anti-Semitism on college campuses. Chinese President Xi Jinping ended his visit to Vietnam by paying tribute to revolutionary leader Ho Chi Minh in attending the launch of a major railway project linking the two countries. The visit capped 2 days of diplomacy aimed at deepening economic and political ties amid rising US tariffs. China and Vietnam signed 45 cooperation agreements covering supply chains, maritime patrols and artificial intelligence. Xi's Southeast Asia tour, which continues to Malaysia and Cambodia, comes as China positions itself as a more stable partner than the US. Hours after Xi's meeting in Hanoi, President Trump called the talks a move to screw the United States. Xi's Hanoi trip also included a tentative deal for Vietnam's Vietjet to lease Chinese-made Comac planes, signalling growing commercial ties despite ongoing tensions in the South China Sea. While Beijing urges resistance to protectionism, Vietnam continues its bamboo diplomacy, balancing ties with both China and the US. It recently agreed to host Elon Musk's Starlink and imposed duties on Chinese steel. Meanwhile, Taiwan's foreign ministry said that Cambodia deported nearly 190 people, many believed to be Taiwanese, to China after arrest links to telecom fraud. The group includes over 180 suspects from Taiwan detained in recent raids on fraud centres. Taiwan accused Cambodia of acting under Chinese pressure, saying it was denied a full deportee list and details on how many there were who were Taiwanese nationals. The move coincides with Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Southeast Asia, with Cambodia among his stops. Phnom Penh has close ties with China and does not recognise Taiwan diplomatically, complicating Taipei's efforts to intervene. Here is what Taiwan Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hsao Kwang-hui told reporters, that the government was still trying to ascertain exactly how many Taiwanese had been deported to China from Cambodia on fraud charges. Let's listen in.
有关本案确切涉案国人的人数资讯，目前住处持续和检方交涉中，政府也将透过两岸机制来了解。同时，外交部要再次呼吁国人，切勿心存侥幸，赴海外从事包括电信诈骗在内的不法行为，以免触犯当地法律，不仅断送个人前途，也损害国家形象。
Taiwan has protested similar deportations before from countries like Kenya and Spain, and reiterated that its citizens should be sent home for prosecution, not to China, which considers Taiwan a breakaway province. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Andrew K.P. Leung, an independent China strategist joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today. I want to look at these deportations. How significant is it, given that they're going to China amid the tensions with Taiwan?
Well, I think that in the light of very close relationship, economically, politically, geopolitically, between Cambodia and China, this deportation is somewhat to be expected as a gift of Cambodia in honor of President Xi's visit. I think the presidency's visit is trying to send a clear message to the world, whereby the originator of a free trade and rule-based world order, i.e. the United States, is now destroying it. Even though these rules and the trading system has been accepted by all over the world. And the United States is destroying it, whereas China, which is blackened and vilified as a challenger to this system, is now its biggest defender. And of course, apart from the narrative, there are very close relationship economically and of course geopolitically between Cambodia and China, and particularly in the connections with the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, as far as these deportees are concerned, there are recently a number of huge scam operations in the Cambodian border with China, and then skimming off victims all over China and even in Hong Kong. And a lot of people have been deported as these scam rings have been smashed by countries in Cambodia and other neighboring countries. Now, I don't know whether these Taiwanese are involved in these cases, but even if they are not, obviously they are under certain criminal investigations, and as I said, it's no surprise that they are now being rounded up and deported as a kind of signal, signifying the close relationship between Cambodia and China.
Yes, Andrew, I want to go on now to President Xi's visit. Of course, we detailed what was discussed with Vietnam and what was agreed with. He's now heading to Malaysia and then to Cambodia, of course, involved in this arrest and deportation of potential Taiwanese nationals. What can we expect from these meetings with Malaysian officials and Cambodian officials?
I think that no country would just like to have rhetoric and narratives. And so the visits must translate into something very concrete to the host countries. For example, in Vietnam, something like 45 business deals have been signed, translated into concrete projects like railway links, commodities and trading, liberalization, and cooperating projects, specific cooperation projects in a host of different fields. And the same could apply to Cambodia, because I think that what President Xi wants to bring is not just the rhetoric. Everybody understands what the rhetoric is all about, but I think it's concrete economic benefits arising from these closer links to compensate for the kind of huge impact on these developing countries. For example, Cambodia is suffering one of the huge tariffs apart from China's, those imposed on China, apart from the huge tariffs on China. And then amongst the rest, Cambodia is suffering one of the highest tariff rates, something like 49%. And that would almost decimate Cambodia's export. And of course, Cambodia and other countries, they all want to enter into some sort of a negotiation. But what Trump wants to do is really put all these trading partners into a disadvantage, into a position of being a supplicant, begging for mercy, as it were, so as to achieve the highest benefits for the United States. And then doing these negotiations not multilaterally, but bilaterally. So bilateral negotiations would give the United States as the largest economy in the world and a very powerful country a distinct advantage. But for some of these poor developing countries and poorer countries, they have to, on the one hand, they've got to defend their own sovereignty. They've got to find a way out, and they just can't be put under the thumb of Trump's tariffs sledgehammer. So they've got to develop alternatives, hedging their bets, as it were. At least finding other channels to grow the economy, to protect the livelihood of their people.
Andrew KP Leung, thank you ever so much for joining us. As Xi continues his tour of Southeast Asia, we will of course bring you all of those updates today and across the week. We stick with the ongoing trade war, and the United States has launched new investigations into high-tech and pharmaceutical imports, signalling more potential tariffs as President Trump doubles down on reshaping global trade. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick confirmed that probes are now underway into the national security risks posed by foreign semiconductors and drug imports. These moves could lead to steep new tariffs. The announcement follows rising tensions with China, where tit-for-tat tariffs have already reached as high as 145% on some goods. China responded with its own tariffs of up to 125%, escalating the standoff. President Trump insists the tariffs will bring critical manufacturing back to the United States, with his administration saying it's moving on Trump time, meaning fast. Let's listen in to what the president said.
We don't make our own drugs, our own pharmaceuticals. We don't make our own drugs anymore. The drug companies are in Ireland and they're in lots of other places, China. And all I have to do is impose a tariff. The more, the faster they move in. The higher the tariff, it's very simple. It's inversely proportional. The higher the tariff, the faster they come. I have a timeline, not too distant future. And we're doing it because we want to make
That's right, but the tariffs will be in place in the not distant future because, as you know, like we did with steel, like we did with automobiles, like we did with aluminum, which are now fully on, we'll be doing that with semiconductors, with chips, and numerous other things. And that'll take place in the very near future. And it'll happen very fast. It'll all happen very fast.
You don't rate the semiconductor tariff?
I'm going to be announcing it.
Markets reacted with cautious optimism. Wall Street edged up and gains were seen in Asia and Europe. But the uncertainty remains, especially as exemptions announced late on Friday on smartphones and chips may only be temporary. Despite the hardline stance, Trump hinted at some flexibility, suggesting he might ease tariffs on auto imports, saying, "I don't want to hurt anybody." This comes as South Korea announced it will inject an additional $4.9 billion into its semiconductor industry to help cushion the blow from possible US tariffs and strengthen its global competitiveness. The finance ministry cited growing uncertainty from President Donald Trump's proposed 25% tariffs, which could significantly impact South Korea's critical chip and auto exports. All eyes are on what happens next in this global economic tug of war. We now head to Europe, and a Ukrainian drone attack on Russia's Kursk city has killed an 85-year-old woman and injured 9 others, according to regional authorities. The strike, which sparked fires in several buildings, including an apartment block, also damaged an ambulance garage. Meanwhile, a new Russian missile and bomb attack on Ukraine's Sumy has reportedly left officials assessing damage after a deadly strike earlier that had killed a reported 35 people. The Russian Defense Ministry claimed their missiles targeted a military meeting, while Ukraine has condemned it as an attack on civilians. In addition, the US President Donald Trump has blamed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for starting the war with Russia, saying the conflict could have been prevented. He also blamed Russian President Vladimir Putin and his predecessor Joe Biden. US President Donald Trump's special envoy said that Russian President Vladimir Putin was open to a permanent peace deal with Ukraine. In an interview, Witkoff said that he sees a peace deal emerging. These comments came in right after high-level talks seeking to end the more than 3-year war. Trump has been pressing Moscow and Kyiv to agree to a ceasefire. However, his administration has failed to extract any major concessions from the Russians, despite repeated negotiations. We head over to North America, and President Trump and El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele met in Washington, marking the first Oval Office visit by a Latin American leader since Trump's return to power. According to media reports, Bukele plays a key role in Trump's revived immigration crackdown, agreeing to take hundreds of suspected Venezuelan gang members into El Salvador's prison system. Both leaders pushed back yesterday on calls to repatriate Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador last month. Despite pressure from the United States Supreme Court, Bukele called the idea of returning Garcia preposterous. Let's hear from Trump and Bukele and how Salvadorans have responded to their meeting.
Bad as anybody that comes in. We have bad ones too. And I'm all for it. Because we can do things with the president for less money and have great security. And we have a huge prison population. We have a huge number of prisons, and then we have the private prisons, and some are operated well, I guess, and some aren't. But he does a great job with that. We have others that we're negotiating with too. But no, if it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem. Now, we're studying the laws right now. It's always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States?
La forma en que Donald Trump está atendiendo a los otros países, como que está haciéndolos, alejándolos más de él, pero a El Salvador lo está acercando. O sea que para El Salvador esa visita de Bukele a Estados Unidos va a ser de gran beneficio.
Fíjate que lo único malo que está haciendo Washington ya mandando gente que quizás solo por andar manchada las están mandando hoy para acá, para el sector. Yo eso es lo que pienso que está malo, porque no te investigan primero para poderte mandar para, digamos, para tu país o del país donde están, porque hay bastante gente que te han mandado solo por mandarlas.
Well, we head back to talking about tariffs, and Japan's envoy is set to depart for Washington tomorrow to hold crucial tariff discussions with senior US officials. Despite being the largest investor in the US, Japan is not immune to President Trump's trade policies. Meanwhile, oil prices saw a slight increase, buoyed by new tariff exemptions proposed by President Trump and a rebound in China's crude oil imports. Independent market analyst Tina Teng highlighted that the tariff exemptions, along with the possibility of relief on auto tariffs, have alleviated concerns and provided support for oil prices. Additionally, new data shows China's crude oil imports in March rose nearly 5% from the previous year. US Energy Secretary Chris Wright also noted that the US may stop Iranian oil exports as part of Trump's broader strategy to pressure Tehran over its nuclear program. Well, on those discussions, the United States and Iran have resumed a second round of nuclear talks in Muscat, Oman, according to Iranian state media on Monday. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Baghai confirmed the meetings are ongoing following what both sides described as positive and constructive initial discussions. And when asked if US options for a response include a military strike on Tehran's nuclear facilities, Trump said, of course it does. Trump said the Iranians need to move fast to avoid a harsh response because they're fairly close to developing a nuclear weapon. Here is what Trump said.
I want them to be a rich, great nation. The only thing is, one thing, simple. It's really simple. They can't have a nuclear weapon. And they got to go fast because they're fairly close to having one. And they're not going to have one. And if we have to do something very harsh, we'll do it. And I'm not doing it for us, I'm doing it for the world. And these are radicalized people, and they cannot have a...
Well, Saturday's high-level talks marked a rare moment of direct engagement between the two adversaries, with the US delegation led by President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and Iran represented by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Both nations have agreed to continue negotiations later this week, though details remain tightly under wraps. Oman has long served as a diplomatic bridge between Tehran and the West, hosting back-channel efforts that laid the groundwork for previous nuclear agreements. Despite the stakes, both sides appear committed to keeping the door open for now. We now head to Africa, and senior officials are gathering in London, aiming to chart a pathway to peace for Sudan on the second anniversary of its brutal civil conflict, but without the presence of the warring parties. Dubbed the Forgotten War, the conflict which erupted on April the 15th, 2023 between Sudan's regular army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces in a power struggle between rival generals, has created what the United Nations describes as the world's worst hunger and displacement crisis. There are also increasing fears that the tensions will spill over Sudan's borders and stir further instability in the impoverished Horn of Africa region. More than 13 million people have been uprooted and tens of thousands killed, according to local reports, with both sides accused by the United States of committing atrocities. Meanwhile, the United Nations have said that between 60,000 and 80,000 households, or up to 400,000 people, have been displaced from Sudan's Zamzam camp in North Darfur after it was taken over by the Rapid Support Forces. Moving on, and Meta chief and co-founder Mark Zuckerberg has taken the stand in a landmark US antitrust trial in which his social media juggernaut stands accused of abusing its market power to acquire Instagram and WhatsApp before they could become competitors. Federal Trade Commission attorneys argue that Facebook, since renamed Meta, devoured what it saw as competitive threats. Zuckerberg was shown an internal Facebook email from 2011 that warned Instagram was a hit on smartphones and could easily copy what his social network offered. The case against Meta was originally filed in December 2020 during the first Trump administration, and all eyes were on whether he would ask the FTC to stand down. The Meta case could now see the owner of Facebook forced to divest Instagram and WhatsApp, which have grown into global powerhouses since their buyout. The death toll from the nightclub roof collapse in the Dominican Republic last week has risen to 231. Meanwhile, the Dominican government has announced a commission of national and international experts to investigate the calamity. The authorities have begun investigations to determine the cause of the collapse, and the forensic investigation will take about 3 months to reach an official conclusion. During the rescue period, more than 300 workers, aided by sniffer dogs, worked tirelessly for days to find survivors and pulled 189 people alive from the mounds of twisted steel, zinc and brick that remain of the structure. We're heading back to the Indo-Pacific region, and China's security officials have implicated 3 US secret agents in cyber attacks during February's Asian Winter Games in the northeastern city of Harbin, offering a reward for information on the alleged spies. China's computer virus watchdog said this month it had recorded more than 270,000 foreign cyber attacks on information systems related to the 9th Asian Winter Games. As per reports, the attacks targeted the event's information release and entry-exit management systems, as well as card payments and local infrastructure between January the 26th and February the 14th. Those found guilty of espionage can face life in prison or execution under Chinese law. China has accused the NSA agents of targeting Chinese companies, including Huawei, which has faced US sanctions since 2019 over national security concerns. Those found guilty of espionage can face life in prison or execution under Chinese law. In fact, in March, China's Ministry of State Security said it had sentenced to death the former engineer for leaking state secrets to a foreign power. Moving on, and pop star Katy Perry and 5 other women have safely returned to Earth after reaching space aboard Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin rocket. The singer was joined by Bezos' fiancée Lauren Sanchez and CBS presenter Gayle King, who said a highlight of the flight was hearing Perry sing Louis Armstrong's "What a Wonderful World." The flight lasted around 11 minutes and took the 6 women more than 100 kilometres above Earth, crossing the internationally recognised boundary of space and giving them a few moments of weightlessness. The capsule returned to Earth with a parachute-assisted soft landing, while the rocket booster also landed back in Texas. Interestingly, the last all-female spaceflight was over 60 years ago, when Soviet cosmonaut Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman to travel into space on a solo mission aboard the spacecraft Vostok 6. Let's listen in to what Katy Perry has said about her first flight to space.
Don't know if any other pop stars have been to space, but I thought I wasn't sure if I was going to sing or if I wasn't, because I just wanted to honor my fellow astronauts and just, hold the space in space.
Haiti's Transitional Presidential Council has approved a special wartime budget to address the country's growing security and social crisis. Armed gangs now control nearly all of the capital and surrounding areas. The budget amounts to 26 billion gourdes, or around $275 million. Funds will be used to strengthen security forces, secure the border and support special programs. Harvey Weinstein is back on trial in New York this week, facing a retrial of his landmark 2020 Me Too era conviction that was overturned last year. Jury selection is now underway and could take up to a week. The disgraced movie mogul was originally convicted of criminal sexual assault and third-degree rape, but saw the verdict tossed after an appeals court ruled that uncharged testimony had unfairly swayed the jury. This retrial brings a key difference: a new accuser with an added charge not present in the first case. Weinstein, who also faces a separate conviction in Los Angeles, maintains his innocence and has pleaded not guilty. The trial lands amid a shifting political climate, with backlash to women's rights and growing support from conservative voices like Candace Owens and Joe Rogan. Weinstein's team hopes changing public sentiment may favour his work. Meanwhile, the 73-year-old producer's health has become a focus. Held in Rikers Island, he's cited severe conditions and ongoing treatment for leukemia and diabetes as reasons for an expedited trial. Well, that's all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.